Welcome back to NHP. John Zilla, James Nichols here with you. We kind of had a little bit of a preview to the podcast this week for those of you who joined us with Hockey DB and Lip Sweater IO, if I'm not mistaken, invited us and a really good cross section of Islanders podcasters and writers from kind of over the years and currently right now, which it was really cool to be a part of that, to kind of talk Kadri, Romanov, the upcoming season and things like that. So it might be a little repetitive if you were there for that. Thank you if you're kind of going into both, when we'll have a little more opportunity, the two of us, to kind of speak about things. So
Yeah.
anything we weren't able to say while we were waiting for all of our colleagues and different things to kind of to talk about it, we'll be able to get a little more room and latitude here. What did you think of last night? That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was cool. Like the whole gang was there. Like everyone from, all over the community was talking about the smoke that is leading to this possible fire with, Nazem Kadri. And it was cool, that I saw that, Hockey DB messaged me. Actually, you were telling me they messaged you, and like I was like, oh, speak of the devil. I got the same message. And yeah, no, it's fun. I always enjoy getting invited to other shows or Twitter spaces. And when I don't have any of the responsibility and I just have to show up and talk, it feels a lot more lighter on my shoulders, right? I'm sure you feel the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's nice to be recognized like that. I was really surprised because I again I was figuring you would have texted me first about it.
Oh yeah.
So I was like, oh, they followed me. I was like, that's super weird. They follow like 1,000 people. Like, why are they doing that? Um, so, and then it kind of got put together, and then I started seeing a whole bunch of, obviously, like all of our friends, and colleagues, like, do have similar tweets, like, oh, we're doing
Yeah.
this. So it was cool. I never met Dan from Lighthouse, so it was cool. Not that I think we met, like we had like a little interaction there.
Right.
Dan from the Lighthouse, Sean from
Hockey
Hockey
night.
Night. I never, like, I just not kind of interacted with them before. Um, I think that was really it. I don't, maybe Dan Friedman. I don't know that I
Mhm.
ever really, like, maybe a million years ago, like 10 years ago. Um, but and it might have just been like Twitter comments back and forth. Everybody else, though, we've had some kind of like relationship with one way or another, even
Sure.
just on Twitter, Rosner to Graziano to kind of everybody else there.
Yeah.
But it was cool to be included. The fans had some good points, a little some funny things where people just get their moment. And it's like, what if Twitter was live? Which is like
Basically.
essentially the point. And so it was kind of funny for people. And it's cool to just feel like you have a platform. So I totally do not I don't know how to put it. Like, I see what they were doing. They had an
Yeah.
opportunity to kind of like put their thoughts out there, and it's cool. If you're not a
Yeah.
writer and you don't want to start a podcast and go through this whole thing, it's kind of cool to do that. So good for the people that kind of had the stomach to get in front of people and say your thoughts. It's not always easy. You can get as we found, when you're wrong or you say the wrong thing or you write the wrong thing.
Yeah,
Um
I thought it was cool that like so many people in the know, or at least had knowledge of like the game or knowledge of the possible pending situation. Everyone had really gotten together, and there were plenty of different views on the positives and negatives of what might become. All very good points, all valid reasons to be a good or a bad thing if this were to go down. So typically I'm more of an optimistic outlook on things. I don't, my first reaction isn't to just go to the, okay, what could go wrong with this? So to see some of those perspectives, and not to say that that's those people's first reflex, that's maybe something that, the takes they had in that space were probably something that they've been contemplating and have had thought about. That's not my first reflex. And there were some really valid points that I didn't think of on the negative end of what could possibly go down with a Kadri
Yeah, I was
signing.
gonna say,
So
let's kind of dive in here because I think that maybe the title of the episode may have led on to that, but there's a little bit of smoke. And as you've said, where there's smoke, there's fire. Um, the fourth period, David Pagnotta was on NHL Network. He had tweeted it, and he was on NHL Network and kind of elaborated on a little bit more.
Yeah.
Our friend and colleague just tweeted a few moments ago, Joe Pantorno,
Yes, he did.
um, that he at the very least confirmed Dave Pagnotta and maybe one or two other people that said that the likelihood is high. He was very careful to mention that no one knows if anything is complete. It's just that the likelihood. Mike Rupp was also on NHL Network, and he had made mention to it as well. Um, I don't think he's an insider, but I'm sure just he knows enough people or can understand how this process works. It's from the player side of
Right.
things to know, like, all right, here's kind of what's happening, and the more time that goes on, the more likely that it is if you're not hearing anything. And if you remember, someone had tweeted and they'd shared the announcement from last September 1st,
Yeah, I saw that.
and then they said, like, "Happy 1 month until we know all the Islanders signings." And I thought it was really funny, and I was like, "All right, I guess, 4 more weeks of winter," or whatever you wanna say, like, Islanders off-season winter. Um, but let's dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Kadri to the Islanders.
Yeah.
There's there's some implications. So what I think you had kinda touched on something, so I wanna start with, um, maybe we should just break down what are we hearing? Maybe I already said it and you can just reiterate. What are we
Yeah.
hearing? Who's saying it? And to kind of what extent can we report on? And then I definitely want to hear what parts of the possibility of this surprised you as we kind of process last night's conversation.
Yeah, so this started with there's a scout in the NHL who, for his own safety, I guess, and in tweeting it, he had said, like, listen, I'm no insider. However, I just got off the phone with somebody who is in the know. And for all intents and purposes, Nazem Kadri is a New York Islander. He will be joining them on Long Island this season. He will wear their sweater. He will play for them. Um, and that report gained some traction. This particular scout, I believe his name was Mark Seidel, or at Mark Seidel on Twitter. Um, he has a large following in the hockey community, so it gained some traction, and others kind of chimed in and looked into this, and I got up to my boss at the fourth period, Dave Bagnotta, who checked in on it himself, and he had even said to me at one point, like, yeah, there's some smoke to this fire here, that there's it's looking like this is the reality. So and then of course he hopped on NHL Network and said the same thing. um and it just brings up a ton of questions as to, if this is happening, what does that mean for the current roster, right?
Right, right, and I think that's where that's the question I wanna ask is because I think I want us to get into our thoughts on that in a second. I wanna know what surprised you from that conversation last night in that regard, or even just in bringing him in at all. Like,
Okay, yeah.
is it a good move? I wanna, like, and then this isn't meant to drag anybody. I just what
No,
surprised
not
you
at
from
all.
that conversation? Because again, these are all our friends, and we like all these folks, and it definitely heard some things as well.
Yeah.
But I'm curious what you thought was a little bit of a surprise, and in a good or a bad way, in some thoughts or things that gave you pause. And then I want to get into our thoughts. So if you could
Yeah, so
separate those two things.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that surprised me was how many people, and again, nothing against their thoughts. They had valid reasons for why they didn't think this was a good idea. But when you looked at the free agent pool this summer, right? Who was the number one free agent? It was Johnny Gaudreau. After that, who was it? It's still Nazem Kadri, or it largely has been Nazem Kadri. And maybe you can interchange one or two guys. Maybe you can say it was John Klingberg, but I don't think it was. I think Kadri was the next best guy.
Yeah, I agree.
The narrative around the Islanders is that they can't attract big name free agents. Well, guess what? If the Islanders end up signing for sure Nazem Kadri, there's your big name free agent that they are bringing in to play for the Islanders, and suddenly that narrative that they can't, you know lure in these big names is no longer true. Similarly, how to it was for Columbus with Johnny Gaudreau. Of course, it's a different stratosphere with a guy like Gaudreau versus a guy like Kadri, but I wouldn't put it past free agents in the future to say, well, Kadri decided he wanted to play there. Maybe I want to go play there too. So um, I think that if and when that does happen, it does put that narrative to rest. Now, the other thing I was thinking too was look at Nazem Kadri's year last year. Sure, he played on the Colorado Avalanche. He got the McKinnon boost, the McCarr boost, whatever you will. He still had 85 points, which would have been about 25, 26 more points than the next best player on the Islanders. Zoom the lens out even further. Even if it wasn't with the Colorado Avalanche, Nazem Kadri is a multi 30 goal scorer. If you put that on the Islanders, because he has proven he can do that. He scored 28 last year, so he was 2 away. You're gonna tell me that he can't do it again? You put that on the Islanders, he's the second leading scorer on the team, only second to Brock Nelson. So my thoughts here were a lot of people are saying they don't think it's a good idea to have this guy. However, he's showing that he's aging gracefully. I don't want to say just yet he's aging like Joe Pavelski because he's only going to be 32. Joe Pavelski's in his mid to late 30s now.
He's
Um, and,
30
and
at 38 or
yeah,
something,
and he had
close
like
to that.
he had something like 85 points last season, which is incredible. But I think when it comes down to it, even if this is like a 6-year deal for Kadri, um, for you might not like it in the later years, right? Years 4, 5, and 6, if it's a 6-year deal. But for the first 3 years, when the Islanders are really in their win now window, you're gonna like it because he's going to be an impact player. He's going to be a guy who you want on your team. Again, even if he only scores 60 points with the Islanders and doesn't replicate that 85, he still would have been the leading scorer on the Islanders this season.
Yeah, I think there's like you said, there definitely are more questions with him in the lineup. I think you're then needing, and I mentioned this in last night as well, or on the Twitter space on Monday night as well. It kind of you kind of have to zoom out about inserting Kadri into the current lineup doesn't make sense.
Right.
There's going to be if you want major change to happen, you have to be willing, and I think I said this kind of like much later on. You kind of have to be willing to make those changes and see some things change in a big way. Like you have to. There's going to be someone that you're not thinking just as much as it's somebody that you don't think the Islanders can get. You also have to remember that there might be a player that's going to move that you don't think is going to move. Bailey is often that first player. Yeah, get him off the roster and whatever.
Right.
Um, and he does, apparently I don't really know what the value is. 'Cause you wonder like if there was value, would a trade have already happened? It could just be not the right move. Lamorello could say that's not enough. There is value in the league. There could be opportunities. He just hasn't done it yet, or hasn't liked what he's seen and is kind of biding his time, which, TikTok. But I think there's what kind of got brought up, and you and I were talking about this earlier on Monday. So it's weird that we kind of had a little bit of a preview to discuss this a couple times
Yeah.
um, on Monday twice, and then and again now is what if they're going to move a center? Who is that? Because I think we were
Right.
trying to shoehorn. We were just looking at the perspective of adding Kadri to the lineup. Was that you're shoehorning him somewhere in the top six? Does he play with Barzell? Does he? Do you move Nelson? You wrote about it too, and not to say that that's wrong and that won't happen, or it's an incorrect take or anything like that. But we just were not considering at all, and rather, I hate to tap myself on the back. I didn't hear anyone else say that on the call or in writing that maybe there's something else cooking. You had mentioned it was a possibility that maybe someone gets traded, and that kind of got me thinking about it.
Yep.
But so maybe you probably spurred that idea for me a little bit. But it made me think about they're already strong up the middle. It doesn't mean that can't happen. But
Sure.
then all of a sudden you have an asset. You have a second asset. It's not all
Yes.
just it's not just about getting Bavillier or Bailey off the roster and their $5 million, right? Yes, that's one part, right? You're not going to move Varlamov. That's been clear. It's pretty much dead in the water at this point. So his $5 million is staying for the season. Um, I actually think it's likely he resigns at a lower rate next season, but we'll get there. Different
It's true.
conversation. Um, just if Sorokin can keep playing more and more, and he doesn't need to play as much, he's a reliable backup at that point. You give him a backup salary, and all of a sudden he's an asset on your team.
Yeah, $2.5 million. I take that all day.
Yeah. Who are you going to get better? Who are you going to get that's better than that? If he can bounce back this year, I think it's good for the Islanders and good for Varlamov, and it's good
Yeah.
for the future for both of them. But thinking about that lineup a little bit, that's where some debate can happen, right? It's not about is Nazem Kadri good and where does he fit, right? They'll figure that out. But what else might need to happen? Is there a possibility that you're not going to move Barzell? They like Zizekas. Nelson's coming off a career year. So the idea of kind of moving him to the wing doesn't make a whole lot of sense, too, right? He did a good job playing at center. He's comfortable in that role. Do
Well,
not mess with success there. I know that there are options, and you can. Well, go ahead. I'll give you that. I'll give you the floor on that.
my thing here is, I don't know. Again, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what avenues that Lamberlo is going to take. But my inclination is that because it's taking this long, there are multiple paths that he could take, multiple different ways he can do this. Right. One of those ways could just be probably, possibly just offloading Bailey's $5 million, replacing that with Kadri, and then signing Romanov and Dobson to bridge deals and fitting everything under that $11 million. The other idea here is, and you kind of alluded to it, was, is there, and that this is something I wrote about a little under a month ago, is there another move happening here, right? If Kadri comes in, obviously he's going to play center. He's not signing up to play out of position. So if they bring him in as a center, what there's already four, right? You have Barzell, Nelson, Pageau, and Cizikas. Now, the Islanders are not interested at all in getting rid of their franchise center in Barzell. So he's staying. Like you said, career year for Brock Nelson. Are they going to sell high on him? Probably not. Are they going to want to keep him as part of the core of this team that they believe can get back to the playoffs and get to the Stanley Cup? Probably, yeah. So they're not going to move him. They just signed Cizikas for 6 years. He's got 5 years left. It works for the Islanders, kind of. You can argue that, but it works for them. And the fact that we can sit here and say it kind of works, and you can argue that, is it going to work for another team? Is somebody else going to want to take him for 5 years at $2.5 million? Maybe not. So the outlier here kind of looks like, is it going to be JG Pageau who's on the move? And you asked that question because I think the Islanders got lucky with him in the sense that he's not your quintessential third liner, right? He's a very good third liner. He might be one of the best in the league, but he can play second line center on another team.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
he's got wheels and he can turn on the offense. I think it's
And right.
disappointing to think about now because he and Palmieri really turned it on late in the season. And like I said last night, it's hard to think about, Parise, Palmieri, Pageau. That's a good third line. I was excited about that prospect. But I think moving Nelson to the wing to me doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Only because he and Lee finally kind of got it going.
I agree with you there. Let me
And
let me
and it's
just say this.
go ahead.
Let me just say this. I agree with you there that it might seem odd after his best season. However, I don't know if you saw the stat the other day, and then I put it in my article that Brock Nelson, among all 30 goal scorers last season, was the most efficient goal scorer of the bunch. That included Austin Matthews. That included Leon Draisaitl, Chris Kreider, all those guys who scored, 52 goals or above. He was more efficient at scoring than those players, which
That
means that
isn't
his shooting percentage was at the top. What I think is, and maybe it's a quality versus quantity thing. That's probably true. However, and if it comes down to it, I'm not saying that this has to happen. It's the best idea. But if it comes down to it, and for some reason they can't get rid of one of their centers and they wind up having Kadri also join the team, is it the worst idea to put your best shooter with your best distributor on a line where you can also just throw Anders Lee on the other side and have a pretty established first line for the first time in a while?
I don't I don't. I think I understand the foundation of it. I just wonder. It's the same argument about moving Kadri to the wing as it is moving Nelson to the wing. They had success in that. The way that I'm looking at it is they had success in their role, in what they were doing. Don't mess with that. If
You
you're
might be right.
stuck, if you're stuck with that, then do it. I want to see it. I want to see it work. This is what I mean to say.
Right.
But I think if you're going to make a difficult decision and a hard move and kind of upset the chemistry and in many ways rebalance the lineup a little bit to be a little bit more, because Nelson's very defensively savvy and responsible, right?
Yes,
So
yes. He's good in all three zones.
moving Pageau hurts because it removes a very good third line center, and you're not to say that Kadri is the new third line center. I don't doesn't the Islanders centers are more or less interchangeable at that point. They're all going to be really really good.
Yeah.
Barzell, inching ahead of the both of them, although Nelson is the better pure goal scorer at this point, or the more consistent goal scorer. But you're swapping out a little more offense instead of a little more defense. You're losing a little bit of a penalty killer. Cizikas and Clutterbuck are a little older. You do have a Parise, so it's good that he's around. Um, Nelson is also a penalty killer. Bavillier's also done a little bit of it. So like you have some guys, but you're losing a tough one. You kind of relied on a Filppula or a Nielsen, then a Pageau for a really long time in that center role to be good on the PK. And at times on PP2, you're gonna lose that player to throw in all situations. You're gonna add a lot of edge with Kadri in a role. Maybe him and Palmieri are line mates, or I don't even know. I haven't really kind of dug into what that looks like and messed around with the lineup. But I think leaving Nelson where he is next to Lee, you at least know, okay, it's Barzell and let's call it Bavillier and Barzell and X, Lee, Nelson, and Wallstrom, Palmieri, Kadri, Parise, or X, or whatever, right? I think the issue then is, and not the issue, rather, the exciting part is, and a different perspective here, Pageau's an asset.
I think
Pageau is
you're
a
right. I agree with
Pageau is
you.
an asset here. That's so yes, you're going to lose a little bit of that defensive part. You're going to gain some offense in Kadri, right? If you're thinking about that being the main swap, but then Bailey is going to be something that you need to give up a fourth round pick with Bailey for a third. And that's return. Well, I'm making up a trade scenario, but like
Yeah.
that's the idea, right? You're not getting anything back or future considerations or whatever the case is. Pageau can give you an asset if packaged with the right thing. William Dufour, whatever. Again, I'm making things up, but Pageau plus something or two somethings, depending on what it is, could get you that top line winger that you're looking for.
You know where my
Right?
mind goes back to?
I want to say because we discussed that Tarasenko is unlikely to get moved. Maybe that was off the air. So that doesn't seem like it's going to be a possibility. Not that a trade request has been rescinded. It's just not in the best interest of the Blues to do that after losing Perron.
Correct. Yeah.
I want to say JT Miller,
I want to say
but
you're right.
I don't know enough about the Canucks to be able to confidently say not that they need a center. Do they need Pageau?
Well, here's the thing.
The positioning thing is what it is, right? The Islanders don't need Kadri in the middle. They need Kadri because of the type of player he is. Could they upgrade at center and do their own little bit of maneuvering in their lineup and their rosters to bring in somebody like JG Pageau, who's got term? He has a 16 team no trade, so it makes it a little bit difficult for the Islanders, but he's under control. He, for all intents and purposes, is a second line center. For all intents and purposes, he was a second line center on the Islanders. They had 3 second lines during his time there. There was no clear cut first line, maybe outside of the first year when Eberle, Barzell, and Lee were really kind of tearing it up. But I think after that, Pageau's a second line center. To have him at whatever that is, $5 million. Am I making that up? Between 5 and 6.
Hmm.
That's a deal for a second line center with his capabilities, who paired with the right forwards can really bring some offense. Is really good in the faceoff circle, easily the best Islander in the faceoff circle. I think Nelson was also really good.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, he was.
but arguably the top two faceoff players for the Islanders, good on the PK. Like, he's an asset.
Yeah.
You can turn him around for something, right? To get so it's not just necessarily about what does Kadri bring, but that could be what's holding things up. Is it's not just about moving money off the books. It's there's other things that also kind of need to happen. I don't know if they all happen at once. I don't
Right.
know if it's going to be like last year where those are all internal signings. I don't know that you can line up all these trades and all this stuff where as soon as Bailey is moved, if he's the player indeed going to be moved, if the second he's moved, things are happening.
Oh yeah.
It's just a matter of what else? Is it the two
Right.
trades? Is it Pageau, Bailey moved, and all of a sudden then we know what the return was for Pageau, and all of a sudden Kadri signed.
So here's why I think you're onto something with Vancouver and JT Miller. Like, obviously the first connection there is what went down at the draft. The trade that didn't happen fell apart at the table, and it was a shock to everybody, because there was so much heat to it. Friedman was talking about it. Gaffar was talking about it with the fourth period, and there were some Vancouver reporters who were talking about it, and then they're asked about it after it falls apart, and Lamoriello says, when he's asked about what happened with Vancouver, he says, "Well, talk to Vancouver. Ask them that question." Um, and of course, Vancouver denied, "Oh, there was never a trade," blah blah blah, which is bullshit. We know that there was, but the thing here is too. I had been. I do know that Vancouver wants to get better on the penalty kill, and not to say that that's like a huge factor that they go out and they trade a guy like JT Miller for, but
If they're not
if
going
you're
to be able to re-sign Miller, then you go get somebody that's
right,
under control, right? And that
right,
makes Pageau even more of an asset
right. So if
that he's locked up at $5 million now that I'm looking at it for a few more years.
Yeah, I think he's got like 4 years left at $5 million, maybe 5 years left at $5 million, and they were third worst on the penalty kill last season. Well, who's the Islanders' best penalty killer? It's JG Pageau. He's a center, which I think Bo Horvat's coming off of a deal soon. They're not sure if they can keep him. They can keep Pageau at a decent number under the next 4 years that they like. I'm thinking that Pageau fits the bill for them very well. Now, are they going to give up Pageau straight up for JT Miller? Probably not. It's probably going to take a little bit more. And like you said, is it a DeFore? Is it like a Simone Holmstrom? Or is it even a roster player? Is it Kiefer Bellows? Is it, an Anthony Bouvillier? Maybe.
I mean, that makes things a little bit easier, right? And that's a lot of money off the books, and
I have to
that's a
say,
lot of money to bring. The Vancouver can't take on Pageau and Bavilier, so
yeah, you're
you're looking at somebody like a Bellows is maybe too expensive, but somebody in the AHL or a prospect and a
yeah,
pick,
you're probably right in
like,
saying
and
that.
that kind of thing.
I do think that Bavilier winds up staying with the Islanders and playing out his contract and probably remaining a little bit longer as well. Um,
I mean, he could. I mean, that might be a player because is under contract. Um, it could be Bavilier
it
and
could be.
change for JT Miller. Then you're left with and I just saw um somebody post and I lost it already, but it had um JT Miller, Kadri, and Barzell as the first line. Lee, Nelson, Palmieri, Parise, Peugeot, Wallstrom, fourth line. I mean, do you, at that point you're going back to the original premise, which was that okay, Kadri's coming in, he's a center, move Barzell to the wing, or move either Nelson or Barzell to the wing. Again, he's found success there. Barzell, just the same as Nelson, maybe not even. I mean, not to the same degree, other than his first season with 82 points and winning the Calder, which is significant. Um, I don't know that you mess with that so much. I think you got to kind of keep some of these players where they're meant to be. I think it's okay to experiment, but you're locking yourself into putting somebody in a different role by keeping Pageau.
The action never ends at DraftKings Sportsbook, especially this summer. With tons of ways to bet on all your favorite sports, you can fuel your fandom and feel the heat of the season like never before. Plus, right now, DraftKings Sportsbook is giving new customers a risk free bet up to $1,000. That's right, make your first bet up to $1,000, and if it doesn't win, you'll get another shot to cash in. You can throw down on all major action for baseball, golf, MMA, and more. Plus, with same game parlays, spreads, money lines, over-unders, and props, your betting options feel endless. Best of all, DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. You can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now, use promo code THPN, make your first deposit, and get a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's promo code THPN, only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details.
And I
Yeah.
just don't know if you want to do that and load it up sometimes. I think it's fine. You look at teams like Toronto, they've definitely done that. They definitely
Yeah.
threw players, Tavares, Matthews, Marner. Like that's definitely been a thing. Other teams have done that. I think is Draisaitl a center as well?
Draisaitl is a center. There has been occasions where he's been stuck on a line with Connor McDavid to make things happen,
Yeah,
late in games and stuff. But his
but it's
natural
not a
position is center.
yeah, and it's not always a regular thing, right? They have split that up. They spend a lot of time together, but it's not all the time. I think locking yourself into that is tough. So
Yeah,
I don't know if that's the move. The money works. You got to move a Bailey and a Bavillier or a Pageau. Two of those players need to go. Two of those forwards, and that's simply to just kind of like make everything jive.
yeah,
Then you got to get a return, right? You're worried. Then you're thinking about Pageau's not a dump, right? At that point, you need a forward. You're not going to trust Ratu. Bellows really sorry. He's kind of waiting for Parise at that point to kind of retire. Um, Parise didn't just sign for 2 years, right? Just 1 year.
no, just a year.
Like I worried myself there for a second. So like there, he could be a future kind of like older Parise with like a ton of energy and kind of doing that third line winger. I think Bells can get into that role on
Sure.
this team. I think that's perfectly reasonable ceiling for somebody like that. I think at this point, that's not what his original ceiling was. Out of the high draft pick that he was, but the honors have kind of struck out half the time with those kind of picks, as we
Yeah.
discussed a few weeks ago with their the lack of success from 2009 to 2014. So yeah, I think it's interesting.
Well,
And I wonder who else is out there too, where we were trying to think outside the box. Like San Jose needs centers. Timo Meyer,
Timo
you've kind of
Meyer,
brought
right?
now. There's a difference between wouldn't this guy be good and this would work for all these reasons. And
Yes.
also, like, he's really good. And that makes me think about what that would look like. And then being honest and somewhat objective and be like, that's not going to work. Right. And that's
Yeah.
kind of what I was thinking about with keeping the players where they are. If you wouldn't move Barzell, don't move Nelson.
Yeah. Yeah.
Arguably,
Yeah.
the last few seasons, Nelson's been better than points wise, been better than Barzell.
And listen, that's
Or goals wise anyway, maybe not points, but
you have a valid point there in saying all that. That all makes perfect sense to me. What it sounds to me like what you're saying is that if the Islanders are bringing on Kadri, there's no way that one of the centers isn't traded. It sounds like, and or let me retract it. There's no way one of the centers aren't traded, and here's why it's JG Pageau. Um,
yes, essentially, yeah. A center needs to be traded. We
right, and
know
now
who's not going to be traded. It's pretty clear.
right.
Then
So
it's a matter of what's left.
you're essentially looking at offloading Bailey for his $5 million. You're looking at trading in a quote unquote hockey trade. There's that
There's your
term.
hockey trade. Yeah.
There's your hockey trade to Vancouver, for instance. For plus a DeFore, a Simone Holmstrom, whatever, for a JT Miller. Now here's your lineup. You have Bavillier, Barzell, JT Miller. You have Lee, Nelson, and Wallstrom. You have Parise, Kadri, and Palmieri, fourth line. Now you're looking at a team who, listen, the
That's a
Islander,
deep top 9.
that's a deep top
That's
nine.
that's arguably a top 6, plus or minus Parise. He can turn it on. He had a really good
Dude, he
second
almost
half of
scored
that
20
season.
goals on a
Yeah.
750K contract.
Yeah, that was one of the best value for the time he was scoring goals anyway. Um, that was a pretty good value. And he's 2 years removed from 25 goals and 3 years removed from 28. Now, I understand it's a long time ago. I understand things can change. But
He
that
showed
was
that
a
he still
pretty
has that motor. He showed it.
he really does, and I'm so happy. Like a third line role for him is so good. Next to somebody like Kadri, I don't know if that's the right move. It sounds silly to kind of book Kadri next to Parise, but kind of remembering how good Palmieri could be, and maybe he just needs that. He was good next to Pageau when Pageau was on. Kadri's coming off of a full year of that. He's always really had that spark, a little bit of an edge. Palmieri has a little bit of a snarl too. That could be an interesting veteran line for the Islanders. And frankly, if they have the room at the deadline, a Parise position is where they can upgrade. That could be where Lamoriello looks to upgrade that middle 6 if they do get a top line winger.
Yeah.
And depending on what the needs are, kind of like um, instead of bringing in somebody like Travis Zajac, they already have that in Zach Parise. Who can they bring in? That's
A,
a different factor. So
a
depending on
blue
what,
liner, that
or
they,
it could be a blue liner. It could be depending on how Romanov shakes out, depending on how Salos shakes out.
right.
Think that's indeed LD3 and LD2, Romanov 2 and Sal 3. And again, that's other outside of Dobson, it's essentially 2 second pairs, or two and a half pairs, whatever you want to call it. But maybe you upgrade the Parise position.
Yeah.
See kind of how the and trades can happen before the trade deadline as well. So that's also possible. So you can all of a sudden you're in it for a rental or something when you really think you could be a really good team and still upgrade.
I
Like you don't
mean,
have to be a bubble team to upgrade.
right. Think about it this way, right? A lineup that consists of JT Miller and Nazem Kadri, you're looking at Anders Lee, who can score 30 goals. And before I go on with this, everything has to fall into place perfectly and go exactly the way you want it to for this to happen in a perfect world. I'm not saying that this is a bring it to the bank thing, but Anders Lee can score you 30 goals. Brock Nelson can score you 30 goals. JT Miller can score you 30 goals. Nazem Kadri can score you 30 goals. Now, all of a sudden, you're like, holy crap, look at all the 30 goal scorers on the New York Islanders.
And
Let's
that was
say
Sean. Sean mentioned that last night. Sean Cuthbert, right? That's how you say
Cuthbert,
his
yeah.
last name. Yeah, that he said that last night. You have a bunch of guys, and you can. It's so easy. He didn't say this part, so a little bit of a preface. You have a bunch of guys with the capability to score, right? That yes, they're veterans, and you can sit there and complain that they're 29 and 30 and 32 and this and whatever, right? They're not far removed from
Not at
being
all.
30 goal scorers, and they
Nope.
proved near the end of the season that they have it. So if you have, God, if and this is what Sean said, if Bavillier can turn it on and Lee can turn it on, and Wallstrom can really get sophomore slump, kind of come in and do his thing and be consistent.
Palmieri.
Palmieri can do it. All of a sudden,
Yep.
and maybe that spark for Palmieri is playing next to a guy like Kadri.
Ryan Pullock scores 10 goals again.
Holy shit, right? So I think there's a lot of opportunity to have really good depth, right? I'm not saying it wouldn't be great to have a 100-point score for the first time in 30 years on your team. I'm not saying, and I think it would be literally 30 years because that it was Turgeon, if I'm not mistaken, was the last one. Stealing a little trivia from later on if we have time. So like you can really think about there's depth. It's just, are they able to do it? And this is the year. If it doesn't work this year, outside of maybe Lamoriello kind of getting the rug pulled out, I think a lot of these players are going to be in trouble. A new GM is going to come in kind of like Guerin and be like, I don't have an allegiance to any of you.
No attachments.
You're no attachments. I do not care how long you've been. It does not matter. Look how
It
fast
would it
Guerin
would
bought out
probably,
Parise and Suter.
I could see a fire sale in the sense that if your name is not Barzell, Sorokin, or Dobson, see you later.
Yeah, it's or Ratu. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
there's like
yeah,
prospects or whatever. Like yeah,
right.
I understand. Roster players, but like yeah, I think that's a problem, right? Maybe even Nelson to a certain degree, right? Because he's been consistent
Not
scoring 30
even,
goals and
not even because let's just say for you know worst comes to worst, this season goes to shit. Brock Nelson still gets 30 goals. He's probably fetching you a return that you want
a first
to
in
help.
prospect. Yeah.
Yeah, he's fetching you something that you want to help jumpstart your rebuild. It's it's
Oh,
a
we were
scary
definitely
thought.
talking like it's, and I don't know if it's a rebuild on the fly. Like it depends on
Yeah,
what's left over. We're talking like doomsday scenario here, but and we don't even know who's signing
we just went
on
from
this
having
team.
630 goal scorers to doomsday.
Well, I think, but that's the difference here, and like,
Yeah,
and what's going to spark that? Bart, look, Bart is some of it the coaching and rebalancing the strategy and
probably.
going a little bit more towards the offense. 100%. I think some of that. There are a lot of different aspects this season that the same way they were like, okay, here's all the things that went wrong last year, right? But now we can talk about all the things that need to go right and kind of like towards a little bit of that positive
Yeah,
or things that need to change and like not necessarily having a negative connotation with that. I think Varlamov having a bounce back year is really important. That is vital for this team's
yeah.
success.
You've been on
Is
that drum, and I agree with you wholeheartedly.
it instead of going 7-10-2 for him to go 17-10-2 and
Yep.
play 30 games, 29, 30, 31 games, and Sorokin have the same exact record, this team's in a different spot.
Yeah.
I said that even before the season ended. They need him to play better. 8 wins. 8 wins was a difference. Less if it was against the Capitals.
Yep.
Less if two of them not were in April, the last week of the season. And I was there for one of them, which was pretty cool. It was a really good game. They won 5-1. My first game at UBS. And my last game at the Coliseum. That's weird. I didn't think about that.
Oh
But
wow.
yeah, that's super weird. Then you're talking about a different thing. And that's Varlamov's record. It wasn't Sorokin. He doesn't know we need to win 8 more games. He stole
Yeah.
enough games.
Right.
Simply 7-8 wins, maybe even 6 wins from Varlamov different. That was the difference. We're not talking about a huge upheaval here. And I think that's something we need to consider when we're talking about this roster and
No.
even our doomsday scenario. Is it even that bad? It really has to do with production this season and the value of the perceived value from around the league of these players and what kind of return. Can
Right.
you
And,
do it? Can you do a Rangers rebuild where you have one more bad year and then you're really kind of getting back into it pretty quickly? It's possible. They have the assets if they can play well, but if they're playing well, hopefully that means they're in it.
right.
So I
And
think, go ahead.
it's, well, to your point, if Varlamov can flip that script, right, and the Islanders are playing well, and they have all of those guys who can score you, like I said before, 30 plus goals, right? How many games did the Islanders lose by a goal? Now suddenly, with all these goal scorers, they're not losing by a goal; they're winning by a couple.
The potential, yes, I think there's a huge. You're playing better in front of Varlamov,
Yeah,
right? So if Varley can turn it around and have a bounce back season, Lambert can rebalance the strategy a little bit. It's going to be him from behind the bench is going to be important, right? There might be some growing pains. We might even with JT Miller and Kadri in the lineup, we may not like what we see at first. It may be clunky. I think give it some time, right? Um, so Lambert kind of rebalancing things. I think Barzell, as a result of the kind of re-strategizing how they kind of go about their business in the offensive zone and the lineup, I think Barzell kind of leading by example there, regardless of who's in the lineup. Miller, who's had better seasons in his um, whatever, and Kadri winning a Stanley Cup and having a ton of points last season. Um, Barzell has to lead by example here. I think he
you,
needs to be one of the players that really kind of steps up.
you
And
want a
it's
bold
like,
prediction here?
go for it.
Barzell's a more than a point per game player this season.
I like it.
He is.
But but the thing is, it's less about Nelson recreating another good season. It's going to be really great for him to hit 25, 30 goals again. But it's more about Bavillier consistently getting to that 18 to 22 goal mark.
Yeah.
It's Palmieri doing the same thing. It's Nelson doing 25 to 30. But it's like they need to take a step. They need to take a step. Barzell needs to be that guy. He needs to make everyone around. He truly needs to become that superstar. Some of that is adding a JT Miller and Bavillier stepping up and kind of things happening.
Yep.
He needs to really be the straw that stirs the drink here. The team goes. He's still the best player on this team. The team goes as Barzell goes. Now it's not going to hurt if Kadri is also on the team and Miller, who really know what they're doing and can assure you every single line is banging on all cylinders.
The thing about
Parise, Wallstrom, and Bavillier are your weak links. Think about that. Those would be the weak links on the team as your wingers. In theory, those are the players that need the most work. Everybody else has a little bit more established. Parise, notwithstanding, he's established, but he's just an older player. The expectations are lower for him. Everybody else is 25 goal scorer and can like really put the puck in the net. Like that's really good. That's most of your lineup is in good shape.
yeah.
That's a lot of trades. That's a lot of kind of maneuvering to make it happen. That's
There's a
the
lot of
scary
moving
part.
parts here, and that's what's scary. Like you said, that's the scary part. The thing I just want to circle back to what you were saying about Bavillier just now. He needs to not only step up, he hasn't broken 40 points yet. And that sounds
Holy
crazy
shit!
to say.
All
He's
right,
not he hasn't even broken 40 points in a season. He needs to not only do that, he needs to be like in the mid 50 point range in order to justify I guess his contract, just because they put the faith in him that he
he
was going
hasn't
to take
broke.
that step forward.
What number did you say?
He hasn't broken 40 points. His highest point total in a season was 39 in 2019-20. He had 18 goals and 21 assists. Now, that's in 68 games. The world shut down after that. So was he going to break that? Probably, but he
In
still has
14
not
games.
yet to do that.
I mean, he'd have to be a point per game the rest of the way, but he could have got into the 40s for sure.
Yeah.
That's upsetting. That really sucks.
Yeah.
And he had 34 and 75. That puts him like on pace for his best season in 7 more games.
Yeah.
Like that sucks. He's
Right.
getting to the age, and because he came in young, right?
He started as a rookie.
He's 25. He just turned 25. Like he's getting to the point where he's a third liner eventually.
Yeah.
Like he's the type of player you're looking for to upgrade Parise. But at this point, Parise's outplaying him. Parise outscored him.
Yeah.
That's disgusting. That's terrible.
Yeah, I think that when in order, like Shayna said when she came on 2 weeks ago, in order to maximize his potential, sticking with Barzell, that's what's going to work.
Because if he can't do it there, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Parise outscored him by 1 point and had 3 more goals.
Crazy.
And I'll take Parise over Bavillier at this point because at least he can kill penalties.
Let's
Based on
see.
past,
Based on past output, I do understand that. A lot of crazy things happened in the last 2 seasons. I don't want to make excuses for any players, but I want to give him the benefit of the doubt that everybody went through hardships, but I want to say that it affected some players more than it did others. Let's see what this season brings for Bavillier. I do believe he's going to start the year with the Islanders. I do believe that this could finally, and I know we always have this headline, but this could finally be the year he figures it out. But that's probably because his deployment might look a little bit different. And I think he'll have a better supporting cast around him.
Yeah, it's definitely, we've joked about it like every year.
Yeah.
Like the last 3, 4, maybe even like 5 years. We've all written is this Villiers' breakout season, and
Yeah.
he's capable of it. Like capable of it. He had really good playoffs. Like he was,
Well,
the
that's what I'm saying. You've seen
Islanders
it.
had a bunch of heroes during those runs in different series, and he was definitely one of them. Um,
Let's pause a second, right? Because I said Baviliers' best season was a 39-point season over X amount of games, but now looking at his playoff performances, 14 points in 22 games in 1920 and 13 points in 19 games in 2021. So he rises to the occasion, right? He has in the big moments. He has the potential. You see it. He can do it. He just needs to figure out a way how to do it in a long-winded season rather than in just these short spurts that he normally does them in the playoffs.
yeah, and it's to put the Islanders in a good position in going into the playoffs, but at this point, you're just talking about them making it, and you saw again the margin for error last season was November and the beginning of and December. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like it was they played like okay the rest of the way,
Yeah,
but as you said before, and as countless people have said before, you can be out of it by American Thanksgiving, and
exactly.
you just need to have players be a little more consistent. Again, you're not asking. I don't think you're asking people to do things ridiculous. Even of Wallstrom, right in his third season, like he's a sniper in his own right. No one's asking him to score 25 goals. Late teens, 20 goals, right? Palmieri, same thing. I think there are a bunch of players that can just score 20 goals, and you can kind of 20 goal your way if your stars are doing what they're supposed to do. The Barzels, the Nelsons, asterisk Kadri, the multiple asterisks at JT Miller. If and your defense is chipping in, um, you don't need more than that from those players. You really don't. If a Nelson's in the 30s and Barzell can really elevate who's ever on that first line, and Lee steps up, like you can do it. You can really do it. I think there's I was looking at this isn't a different era, and this steals a little bit of the potential trivia that we were going to do, but I've been like obsessed with like early 2000s Islanders lately. And like the Islanders Pride, I'll give them like a ton of credit. There's all these videos and like from all these months different. So I'm going through and I'm like rewatching the Toronto Islanders series from 2002, which is 20 years ago, and that makes me sad. And it definitely hurts my feelings. But then I was looking at the 0304 Islanders, who I said this, I did this little trivia piece on our Twitter. They went into the playoffs fifth in goals. They were shut out in 5 games against the Tampa Bay Lightning, the eventual Stanley Cup champions. They were shut out in 3 of 5 games and scored 5 total goals in that series.
Oh, God.
The leading goal scorer on the team that year. Oh my God. Okay. Wow. Okay. This is there's some trivia here. Who was the leading point scorer in the 0304 season for the New York
Points.
Islanders? Points.
I don't. I
He
used
was
to love.
tied for the team. He was
I used to
tied for the team
love
league.
Jason Blake, but I don't know if it was him. Was it the best year that Trent Hunter ever had?
Wow. Wow. That's it.
Is it?
It's Trent Hunter. 25 goals, 26 assists. They were 5th in the league. Now, this is like obviously pre-lockout, so things were changing, and I don't know who had like the top in the league at that point for goals for. And what that looked like and how it compares to now. I don't have all those analytics, but like, yeah, it was Trent Hunter. Who was number 2? We're just gonna get into this. This transitioned.
Number 2. Was it? Did they have? I'm trying to remember. Was it?
I know you want to say it, and
I do. I really do. Is it
you have
Oleg?
it.
Oleg Kavasha?
He was number 2.
Oh my God! Go me.
All right, we're gonna keep going. Who's number 3? This is a real like
Now, is that Jason Blake?
no.
Oh, all right. Who was it?
You one more guess.
I'm trying to remember who was on the team.
This
Yashin?
is like this is like long-term Islander at this point. I'm gonna ignore that guess. This is a long-term Islander at this point from
Parrish, Pekka.
just after no long-term Islander. He's been on the Islanders for a long time at this
Oh,
point.
Zukowski.
Yeah, Trukowski.
Yeah, whatever.
Then Blake, and then Adrian O'Coin. Yashin was number
Oh my
8.
god. Oh my god.
Yeah, just like going through that, I was just like having moments. Jason Blake's 40-goal season was in 06-07. Another one of those Islander teams that made a playoff run. I think that was when they got beat up pretty good by Buffalo.
Yeah.
Really good Buffalo teams. Yeah, I was going through some of these and like having that comparison, like thinking about the Islanders roster now, right? And having a bunch of like, you can, now they didn't win any rounds and, whatever, maybe that 01-02 team that, Yashin, Paris, Pekka, Bates, Drakowski, 230 goal scorers and a 25 goal scorer. Again, they were 6th in the league at that point out of 30. Really terrible defense, but 239 goals scored in the season. You can really do it. And I think that was a really good team when they playing that Toronto team. I don't think they were winning the cup that year by any stretch, but you can see what a little bit more balanced scoring could do and kind of like really tough D. And I'm not trying to compare. I don't really know any of the stats. Like it's not worth it, but it's interesting seeing that balanced scoring the way that they had it. They had this Kavasha that could score and was like dynamic in the playoffs and
Yeah.
at times, not necessarily in that year, but their top players were stepping up, and then you had like Kit Miller
Oh my
that like
god.
you know what I mean. So like who kind of like came in. I believe he was traded for like.
Yeah.
Um, it's really weird seeing the numbers. Like you just see number 11 and you're just like going through the Rolodex, like who the hell was on number 11, like
Yeah.
in that thing. But yeah, Kit Miller had like a short season with them, 24 points in 37 games. Like that's the kind of stuff where you had a lot of players, like point per game players. You had 3 point per game players and a bunch of players that were pretty close. Like that was like one of the teams. It's not like the 93 team where it was like the best team that didn't go anywhere kind of thing. But they were good. They're really good. You just don't want this team to be that.
Yeah, that's crazy. That is crazy. You brought me down a trip on memory lane there just now. That was,
Yeah,
and
it's
I'm
wild.
surprised at my at running on no hours of sleep over here, new dad. My memory. I'm surprised.
Oh my god, it was pretty that was pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. It's going through like that's especially it was like because it's been 20 years and I have like the pucks. That was like when I first really became a fan and like started collecting a
Yeah.
bunch of stuff. So like all my stuff is from that season. I have all like the team photo signed and cards and there's all these Claude Lapointe and all this stuff from like that early 2000s era. But yeah, going through that is definitely a trip.
Yeah. So I think that the last thing I want to say on like the situation is that it's possible we find out before September. I know the joke is like, oh, that's when Lamoriello will let us know when the other shoe has dropped, but he's not in the same situation he was when Everley got plucked from Seattle and he just gained cap space. He's got
Yeah.
to make
Did you mention
moves.
that? Yes, that at during the Twitter space,
Yeah,
somebody did. Okay.
right. So he's not in that situation. He's got to make moves. So and the other teams aren't going to hide it from the general public. So we might know sooner rather than later.
I wonder. I think it's tough because there are trades that need to happen, and
Well, that's what I'm saying.
there's another team that's involved. So like,
Yeah,
there's only so much you can keep under
under wraps.
wraps. And again, a lot of things precipitate other things. So like when one thing happens, another thing can happen.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's because you don't really know, like, so all you see is that the Islanders have 11 and change in cap space, and some of that's for Dobson, and we don't know that deal, and some of that's for Romanov, and we don't know that deal, and some of that's likely for Bellows, and we don't know that deal. And you're kind of like going through all this stuff, and then you're like, okay, there's still 2 roster players that are going to get moved, like 2 forward roster players that could get moved.
It's quite possible.
That's significant. Like all of a sudden,
Yeah.
you're talking about maybe a $10 million swap, but one way or another, right? Between $9 and $11 million in and out, depending on who's moving. It's crazy.
Yeah.
There's only so long I think you can keep it under wraps.
Exactly. Right.
Surprised this, this is like we're in the dog days of the off season here. I'm surprised we got this long out of it, but that prep last night probably helped.
Yeah.
And judging by my lighting and how that's changed, and now I look like I'm some artsy YouTube video. I'm about to tell you about some technology or something like that, like my review of something. Might be time to wrap it up. I know you
Here's
need
how to
to,
empty your trash bin.
or something. I'm a big, like, I research a lot of stuff when I'm gonna buy it for like way too long. Like I need to just like pull the trigger on stuff. I research everything within an inch of its life. It's disgusting. So like now my whole YouTube like explore page is monitors and like all this weird tech, because I was like, I wanted to upgrade stuff, and I finally did it. So now I need to like find the new muse. But yeah, all this, like this tone of like whatever this lighting is how all these videos look.
I think on that we can end the show.
We can end the show. We're being this is very meta. Anyway, please rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to or watch the show. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Nazem Hockey. You can find James' work at the Fourth Period. You can find my work at the Hockey Writers. Make sure to subscribe to Isles Fix so that when this move inevitably happens in the middle of the night, Joe Buono somehow is going to wake up.
Blast your inbox.
And geez, that's very aggressive. That's personal. Yikes! I'm uncomfortable. I'm going to HR. I don't know who that is, but I'm uncomfortable with that. Send you a very important email. Hockey's not that important. There's no blasting. Emails are weird. Go to bed. So that Isles Fix can kind of catch you up with all the latest news as it happens. It's a great curated Islanders newsletter during the season, so get on board early. James Nichols, bring us home, buddy.
Until next time, everybody. Let's go Islanders.